morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Becky Sims. I'm the founder and CEO of Human First Collective, and we're so pleased to welcome you to our Brunch and Learn Ask the Experts. Now, it may be no surprise that a lot of your questions are about AI today, so we're going to be delving into some really interesting and very topical topics and things that that we might not even know all the answers to yet because things are changing so fast. So it's super exciting to have you here. So Human First Collective, if you don't know us, is made up of Reflect Digital and Lab. Reflect Digital is a performance marketing agency here to unleash your potential. We combine behavioral science with all of your normal performance marketing disciplines to absolutely nail it when it comes to reaching your audience and getting the best results for your business. Lab is a technology and innovation agency dedicated to creating game-changing experiences. So they unite behavioral science, creativity, and the digital solution side of it to ensure that we get unique perspectives to fuel impact for our clients. So hopefully, if you ordered one, you've received your brunch box. You are welcome to tuck in. If you've already eaten it, don't worry. If you've got kids, definitely hide it from them because I know they get hold of them and steal all the good bits. But thank you so much to Erin and Lucy for arranging those and getting those out. So we want today to be interactive. A lot of you have already given us questions, so we're going to be starting from those. But if you've got questions as we're going through, just pop them in the chat and Erin will magically make sure they appear here for me to ask. If there's questions that you ask that we don't get to today, we will get an answer out to you in the next week or so in our follow-up. So we will aim to answer everything at some point. Muted standard view is going to give you the best experience today, so in your setup, so that is just a note for you. And today I'm joined by a fantastic panel, some of our wonderful team across Human First Collective. I'm going to ask them all to introduce themselves, and I'm going to go down the line, starting with Azim.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Azim. I am the Strategy Director here at Reflect Digital.
Fabulous. Over to Dean.
Hi, my name is Dean, and I am Managing Director of Lab.
Hey
there, I'm Lottie. I'm Director of Behavioural Science and Innovation at the Human First Collective.
And Matt.
Hello, I'm Matt. I'm the Innovation and Automation Lead at Reflect Digital.
And Mike.
Hello, I'm Mike. I'm Tech Director at Lab.
I know these names so well, but the pressure of remembering your names is really good fun. But I did remember them all, so it's fabulous. I mean, I work with them every day. I love these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who am I? Where am I? Well, let's get into the fun stuff and let's see if they've got some answers to our questions. So, as I say, keep your questions coming in. We're going to start. So, these are very AI based. Like, I was thinking we do an AI section, and then I looked through the questions and I was like, I think it's just all AI almost. But I think there might be some that aren't. But we'll start off. We're going to kind of look at human and AI because I think that makes sense from a Human First Collective perspective. So we have Laura from KAL Group. So Laura has asked, and this I'm going to come to Dean first, based on how fast AI is moving, how can human marketers secure their job?
Yeah, it's funny. I think I was thinking about this. I mean, I think obviously you've got to be aware of the tools and you know, either your company provides those tools or you've got your own sort of selection. But really just leaning into the human side as well. I mean, I always think the most powerful sort of tool I have is curiosity, and that curiosity is first in terms of the business, again, and understanding the business problems, you know, so, and the technology is there as, again, and I think augment is always a good phrase to use when you look at AI. It's, you know, yes, there are things it will replace, but for most marketeers, your knowledge and experience and the human side of things is always going to be more important than simply just having these tools. It's about, yeah, I mean, I always think, you know, it's like a foil for me, AI. You know, yes, it can create new things, but it's also something I use just to brainstorm with. But yeah, lean into the human side of things. I think, you know, if you can manage people, if you can influence decisions, if you can, yeah, make change happen, you're always going to be a powerful member of the team, you know, and AI, yeah, I mean, it will help with that, but it isn't going to do it on its own.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Lottie, did you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the experience piece is the one I think that is the biggest element that as a human you can contribute. And I think a lot of people do have that kind of nervousness around using AI and how to integrate it into their jobs without necessarily making themselves redundant in that process, which I can understand it can be a bit daunting. But I think the main thing really is if you're feeling like that, really just to understand what is it that AI can do and what can't it do. Because I think there's a there isn't a sense in some instances where people feel like you can just automate everything, like you can use AI to do every job, and that's not always appropriate in every instance. Even if it can technically do it, it may not be appropriate from an ethical perspective in any case. So I think it's about understanding what is appropriate for using AI for and what it's not appropriate for, what it can do, what it can't do. I think that would then give you a good confidence around like your own value to what you do in your role and actually where you sit as a person versus using AI. So I think it's about just sort of balancing that and making yourself a bit more comfortable with the two.
Definitely. And it's that collaboration, isn't it? It's that colleague that's there
Yeah,
all
exactly.
the time that you can ask questions to and you can ask for support, but it's not you. You
No.
can't bring the human side. Azim, did you have some thoughts on that one as well?
Yeah, for me, I'm just going to put my cards on the table, early doors. I think whenever people ask questions around things like this, that if I was to put an arbitrary number on it, I would say 50% of those people are just genuinely worried, like, will I still have a job next week?
Yeah.
The short answer is yes. And just to echo what my colleagues have said, there's some things that AI cannot do. The number one thing is understand the context, sorry, or nuance. So I think, in short, people shouldn't be worried. I don't think their jobs will be replaced. I just think that their jobs will evolve. And for those people who are joining this, who've got multiple years of experience in the industry, I would urge them to reflect, pun intended, on their own experience throughout their professional careers and how that has evolved over the next number of years. So just be ready to change, that's all, rather than everything's on fire, I need to put it out.
Definitely, definitely. Now I'm going to stay with you, Azim. Our next question is from Benjamin Gibbs at TCI GB. Hi, Benjamin. What advice do you have for brands to avoid losing their personality through AI content creation as it becomes more creative and human-like?
Love this question, and thanks very much for asking. I, on my LinkedIn, a few months ago, I put a poll out and I said, very straightforward, how would you feel, or how would your perception of a brand change if you knew that their imagery was AI generated as opposed to real? And the answer, although it wasn't a sample of the whole UK, the answer was overwhelmingly negative. So in short, people can tell when AI imagery has been used. And I think a lot of the time, in my own experience, certainly people use AI in these situations to save time and to cut corners, which is great. I'm all for that. But for me, there's saving time and cutting corners, which I put into two different brackets. If you're cutting corners, people will see straight away. And I would urge brands who are doing that to reflect upon that, because consumers are more savvy than ever. And if you're putting out into the world that you've done this on a whim or very quickly, people will tell, and those pounds, dollars, euros, delete as appropriate, will just be spent elsewhere. So while you might have been very quick to get activity out, customers will be wise to it straight away. So stick to what you do well and do more of that, is my short answer.
And it's funny as well, isn't it? Like there's been a lot of chatter around like the M dash when it comes to written content. And if the M dash is there, then this must be AI content. Actually, it's almost like something that we didn't really use that often, but actually grammatically, it's a really good thing to use from what I'm understanding. And so it's almost like now we're kind of punishing what's the right way of doing things by going, oh no, then I'll look like, I've got to take out the M dashes. I can't use an M dash because people think I'm AI. So I wonder, I think there might be more things like that that crop up over time, where it's almost like we look for things to not be too polished because we're like, if that's too perfect, that must be AI. I almost want to see the slightly rougher version to go, I feel like that's been human. So yeah, it's interesting. Lottie, I feel like you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so we did a roundtable, didn't we, a couple of months ago around digital PR, and there's really interesting conversations there around the feeling of using AI in the process of content creation. Because obviously I think there's quite two sort of teams, if you like, in regards to whether it's appropriate or not. And there was a kind of overwhelming sense in the room that using AI to create content is not the right thing to do, which is fair enough if that's kind of in that team of people. However, from the perspective of creating something that's scalable and the efficiencies that AI can bring, there's obviously is potential there for using AI. So in those instances, I think the main sort of recommendations that we'd give is around ensuring that whatever models you're using have got enough detail on your sort of brand tone of voice and who you are as a business, so that you can use that information, obviously training it appropriately in regards to your own style, content, etc. But also just using it, like you said earlier, as a team member. So it's not there to write the content for you. It can be used as a purpose to create ideas or themes, kind of expand or kind of be able to review it as well. Because I think that's a really nice way that you can use. Once created the content, you can then use AI to help review that content as well. So there's definitely ways to still use that efficiency and scalability that AI brings without relying on it for creating your own content. Because I think, as you've said, people don't want that. But there is still a place that it makes sense and that actually it is acceptable for AI to play a role in that content creation.
It's ideation, isn't it? It's literally
Yeah.
like help me with some ideas, and they're not going to be the final ideas, but you just need somewhere to start.
Yeah.
But then don't let it keep going.
No.
Well, there might be an example, but where you need to that. But yeah, in most scenarios, you're going to make a better. If you know that subject matter better than AI, you're going to do a better output at the end.
Yeah.
But you can use it to help form your ideas.
And a good example, actually, I write regularly for Search Engine Land, and I was trying to work out what's a new topic to talk about. So I had a few angles that I was thinking. So I literally said to ChatGPT, can you tell me, have Search Engine Land written about this before? Can you help me find all the articles? So, because I want to produce something for them that's going to be different. They're not going to want it if it's the same thing they've already got. And it came back and it was like, there's this one, and this one. And then I was like, okay, so I'm thinking this angle. And it was like, yeah, I think that would work for X, Y, and Z, because it then understood the audience. And then as I wrote the article, I would put it back in and go, is there anything you think I've missed? And then it goes, oh, you could go here. And I'm like, that's really helpful. Good idea. I'll write about that. And it's just that, literally, that instant feedback that actually, if you wait for your colleague, you sometimes wait in a couple of hours because they're in meetings or they can't get to it till later in the week, but you can actually keep going. And then you still get a human colleague to check it over afterwards as well, because we want that. But it's just,
it does make stuff up. I mean, I had the example last week, asked it some questions and it came back and I was like, where did this come from? And it said, oh, sorry, I added this in. And I was like, it didn't even, just, what do you mean you added it in? This is why you have to be so careful.
Yeah.
You have to be able to understand what it's outputting as well. So this is where the human in the loop, right?
Yeah.
You can't just expect it to shoot content out without checking it.
It's quite funny when you call it out and it goes, oh yeah, sorry.
Child, isn't it?
Yeah. What's up? And you're like,
that's why you need to check it. And you cannot rely on it just to purely just shoot stuff out.
Yeah, love it. Right, Mike, I'm coming to you next. So Caroline from Bupa, I think you're a regular. We see you on here regularly. Lovely to see you, Caroline. How can we use AI to complement existing customer sales journeys without losing that human touch?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think, we're all part of the Human First Collective. I think for us, putting the humans at the centre of everything we do is really important. I think AI brings a massive kind of savings in terms of efficiency, automation. But I'm a tech director. For me, it's always important to utilise tech where it makes sense. But I think we always need to do it with a human first kind of approach. For me, there's ways of doing it. I think there's things like giving choice. So if you have a website that has an AI chatbot on there, you might also have someone in a call center that is answering like live chat questions, but there might be a 15-20 minute delay waiting for someone to be online and be available. So I think something as simple as just giving them the choice of saying, look, we've got Steve in a call center, but there's a 20-minute wait. Like, he can answer your question, or we've got, Gary, the AI agent that can, he's trained on all of our data. He's able to kind of answer the basic questions and stuff. Would you like to speak to him first? And giving them that choice, I think, because people interact with different things in different ways. Some people like having an AI agent because it may be their first interaction with the brand, and they don't want to be too committal. They just want to have a nice, easy transaction. Some people might like talking to a person. So I think it's understanding what that person wants at that point in time in that customer journey and giving them choice.
Yeah. And I guess we also have to remember that at the moment, the average customer is probably thinking of an AI agent, how these kind of standardized live chat things have been, where it's not a real person and they've just got a bank of answers.
Yeah.
So they're coming into it going, this is going to be rubbish. And then they realize, actually, if it's a good piece of AI from an agent perspective and it's well trained on answers, actually it can be really incredible. But most people don't know that yet. No. So it's almost like trying to also, the way you present it to the customer, you need to make sure it's presented in a way that they go, that actually looks like an interesting option.
Yeah.
Maybe I can hold my place in the queue to talk to Steve.
Exactly, yeah.
While I try this, and then I'm going to drop out with Steve because this guy online has
something else. It's knowing when the right point to hand over is. So the AI agent has taken enough information. It has the context of knowing this person's getting frustrated with the conversation, or I know that I've given them enough information, now I'll be able to promote them. And you could even move it up the queue because they now have some kind of qualification information that they can hand over to the real person. So I think there's also things that can go on behind the scenes. So if you've got someone that's sitting in a call center and they're getting emails through for customer complaints or customer feedback, it can you can use AI to kind of understand the content and the sentiment around it to see actually this particular issue is really high priority, so let's move it up the queue, and then a real person can get on that quicker, and it really then just builds that kind of human connection because they're then dealing with that person at higher priority rather than just working through a list. So there's different ways you can do it.
I was just going to say as well, and Lottie mentioned it, I think the key thing here as well is brand consistency. Like all of this content we're creating, whether it be in a sales scenario or marketing, is it consistent with your brand foundations, right? And someone needs to check that. And I know I think there are capabilities now where you can do that, even do that with AI. But ultimately, for a lot of us, we don't have that technology yet. So there need to be brand guardians, and as marketeers, we are the brand guardians, right? So again, we need to make sure that what we're outputting is consistent, because consistency is one of the key parts of any successful brand.
Yeah, and being transparent when it's AI as well. I think that's important. I think people are really gonna look for that in the future. You don't want to feel like you're talking to a human and then realise afterwards, hold on, this wasn't. Because then you feel a bit cheated, don't you?
Yeah, we had a conversation about the use of like naming agents and like how people might feel about that, because again, it could, if it's a bit ambiguous, then that isn't necessarily the right way to go either. So if you give it a name and a face, but it's not clear that it is AI, then that obviously could be an issue for people. But actually, in some instances, it might be that people prefer that view, but they want to know that that is who they're speaking to.
So we've got Reflect the robot at Reflect. Rupert the robot. I think I said the wrong thing then. Put my teeth back in. I feel like you were about to add something, Dean. Then
no, I was just thinking it's almost like we need a consistent, universal mark for what AI. Wherever it's what is that? What is that? How do we know? Because we don't, and we should. And maybe that is something. Again, I always think we rush into these things. Right? We're getting to the point now with AI where with social media, we're starting to hang on a minute. What's the consequences of some of the things we're doing? And again, I think we can't answer all those questions today, but I think it's a really key one.
Definitely. So this is in a similar area, and either Mike or Matt probably on this one. So Laura, who's ex-Anthony Nolan. Hi, Laura. Any tips on using AI to streamline customer journeys?
I can go first on that one. I think similar to what Mike said, there's the options that we have in sort of a traditional customer journey, where you look at maybe the stage where they arrive on your website, they experience maybe one page, they go on a journey through the website, and then they convert. And one of the ways that I would break that down, if I'm looking at that from a process perspective, is actually how can I improve this step? How can I improve this step? How can I improve this step? And there's loads of things within that actually AI is perfect for. So the example of reviewing content, we can do personalization to a certain extent in the way that people experience that. So say we've got an AI that's trained on how someone who is maybe colorblind might see that page. That AI is going to be perfect at going in and analyzing, oh, by the way, you've used this color on this background. That's not great for this person. Maybe change that. But that sort of personality can be changed into 1,000 different things in 1,000 different ways. So someone who isn't very technical, someone who's professional with loads of experience in your area in B2B or something like that. Those kind of characterizations can really help AI to be that supportive, almost like testing case. So rather than having to survey people or get people in to do a live test of your website, your user journey, your experience, you can simulate that with some basic training. So that's one way I would look at it. The other one is the more advanced, the non-traditional stuff. So that's where we start to look at the AI integrations of chatbots, whether you can do AI search. So we've seen quite a few larger companies moving from keyword-based web search into entity search. So it's not just looking at the words that you're putting in, it's looking at, well, they've searched for that and then didn't find what they wanted. So they've searched this. What is the connection between the two? What can I give them that is going to answer their question? So sort of upgrading and advancing tech from that side would be another great way of doing it.
As you're saying that, I'm kind of imagining that there will come a point when a website, the way we know it, isn't what it is. Like I just manually click through and follow what I'm interested in. But I almost imagine there'll come a time where you kind of land on this website and you go, I am looking to do X, Y, and Z. And it almost it just makes the journey out of all the content that company has to offer that suits what you're looking for. A bit like if you were chatting to a person and the journey they'd take you on in selling their product or service. So I don't know.
And then we've seen that with platforms like generative AI platforms like Perplexity, for example, are trying to recreate that, where they've got this bank of content, which is traditional websites, but they're using search, they're using combined generative AI, they're using all sorts of platforms and experience that they've built on top of that data to try and mean that the user gets their own personalized and tailored experience. Obviously, that's a challenge from the perspective of the websites who are giving them all the information and never getting a click. But I think there's, it's definitely a direction to travel.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Mike, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just to build up on that, as you said, there's a number of AI tools that are available to kind of support that journey. And to touch on, I think Matt's point at the beginning is sometimes you don't know what the problems are. So I think you can use AI to help surface some of those. Like most people have quite a lot of data on their websites, whether it's Google Analytics or Hotjar or Trustpilot reviews or customer feedback. You can kind of pour that into kind of a lake and use AI to kind of pull out the themes and understand where people have found kind of barriers or friction in certain journeys. And that even just might highlight some things that maybe AI can help, or actually maybe it's just a process adjustment or more communication at a certain point, but you can use AI to kind of just help get that communication and that customer journey better.
Yeah, nice. I like that. So the next one was from Michelle at Community Fibre, and this is probably a Mike, a Lottie, and a Matt. So I'll let you decide who wants to answer first. But how would AI help, or how could AI help understand users' needs? Who wants to dive
I'll
in?
jump in first. So I think for me, this kind of breaks into two things. There's customer needs. Are you servicing their customer needs currently? So this could be, again, through understanding feedback and all these kind of things that you're looking at the GA and understanding where people are dropping off. What kind of sentiment are you getting from the kind of conversations you're having with people? Are you getting reviews back after you've done something with them, understanding how they're happy? So you can kind of understand how you're currently servicing their needs. But then you can also look at kind of future. Let's predict what they're going to want in the future. And I think things like social listening, using AI to look at social media, looking at different blog platforms. If you're in the media or travel area, where are people looking at going? What are they talking about? What's getting a lot of buzz at the moment? What kind of holidays are they doing? Where are they staying away from? And understanding kind of reporting on that kind of stuff, because that could then infer strategy, or it could be something as simple as a blog article or reaching out to clients to go, do you know what, people are starting to click here, and it shows thought leadership. It shows kind of that you're thinking about what's coming up next. So I think you can look at things now, but also kind of how you can support them in the future.
Nice, nice. Lottie, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the areas that sometimes does get overlooked is the use of like analyzing the content of chat discussions that users are having, because there's a lot of data within there that will help understand what are the needs that they have and what they're not necessarily getting from the experience with the site. And if you're not doing that, that's a huge amount of data that you can really utilize to help understand what changes do we need to make to the journey or the actual content on the site or whatever it might be. And obviously by doing it at scale, you could do that at scale if you're using something like AI to then synthesize what all that data says, what are the patterns that we're seeing within that data, and then be able to use that to kind of inform your roadmap for the website change.
And what about also, just kind of linked to this, and I feel like we had another question about it somewhere else, the use of synthetic users for kind of helping you to understand audiences. What are our thoughts on that? What have we seen there?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. Again, there seem to be sort of different camps, depending on where how excited you are about AI, but also kind of the human element as well. So personally, I think there is a place for using synthetic users for things like analyzing and getting report data back on sort of changes that you're making, or if you're using them from the perspective of instead of interviews of actual people, you can use synthetic users. There's a report that was published that said for B2B instance, there was about 95% accuracy between reports of what synthetic users were providing versus human responses to the same questions. So in those instances, I think there is definite value to using synthetic users, and particularly in areas such as B2B or small data sets where it's difficult to actually get enough users potentially to be able to provide you enough data. Synthetic users can provide a kind of a plug for that gap. What I would say is I wouldn't necessarily use synthetic users to create the hypothesis or decide what the process is to go down necessarily. You can use it to maybe validate what we think is happening and the change that's happened. I wouldn't necessarily go down the route of relying solely on synthetic users to make the decision as a business of what you need to then do. And I think that's probably where the differentiation comes between where synthetic users have a role and where you stick to using kind of people.
And just in case anyone watching hasn't heard about synthetic users, what is that? That is...
Yeah, so synthetic users is essentially using AI instead of a person. So you can create, let's say if you're doing an interview, for example, you could kind of ask the synthetic user essentially, which is basically an AI agent behind that, to say, answer these questions. So it gives you a response. Obviously, it's being trained off the population data, and therefore that's why you get quite a close association between the reality versus what the synthetic user can provide. The differences obviously are that it hasn't got any of that experience. It's relating back what it has seen and what is in the digital sphere. So anything that is a more tangible experience or anything that can't be digitized in that way, it's not going to have that data. So that's where some of those limitations are going to come in. But that's essentially how it works. So instead of using a person, you're using AI, which is then trained off a big data set to provide the responses and the insights that you would get from asking an individual or a person or a group of people or whatever it is you're using.
It's clever, and if it's 95% accurate in the right place,
in that report, it can
speed up things for businesses.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Because as we know, we do a lot of user research, and it does take time and to do it properly. So it's almost like at what point, finding the right points in your strategy where you go, do you know what, it's worth it for this to use that, where we still need to have our human touch points that we're gonna. It's interesting, isn't it? Very interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's a really exciting area. And I think it's just about that kind of combination of the two. And again, like I said earlier, it's understanding what is ethical and appropriate. So there may be some instances where potentially using synthetic users isn't appropriate from an ethical perspective. And so therefore it's just making those judgments in those particular instances.
Yeah, definitely.
Judging what that 5% is that it gets wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
If that's particularly bad, could be something
Really quite important. It was one, it was one report. We can share some of the reports. There's another one. Nielsen has also done a report. It's interesting because one report was written by one of these tools that does provide synthetic users as a panel, which obviously they're going to be biased. And then there's some other reports out there from places like Nielsen, who obviously are on the other side of the fence, where they're looking at it more from the, if they use AI to do it, or then what are they going to do in the instance? And I think that's quite a balanced report. Again, there is some bias because they have a perspective on the side
other side,
but I do think it's quite a good balanced view of where you can use both, so we can share.
And I think the future is balance, isn't it, with all of this?
Just gonna say, that's like there's a lot of stuff at the moment that will make you, especially as marketeers, go, oh my god, what's going to happen. I think be cautious of people selling stuff, right?
A
lot of people have got a reason to be promoting
the
end of the world.
There's so many tools popping up, aren't there? So like knowing what's the right thing to use, and actually maybe, I don't even know if that's a question on here, but if anyone's got any thoughts on that, like where do you start with the kind of, we're a new AI startup that does this versus that versus, it's like, where do you start?
I mean, my opinion on it is that we're so early into this sort of integration process where it's quite rare that you get a technology that's deployed as just the technology itself and everyone is aware of it in the sense of that's AI. Whereas actually normally it's a feature that's introduced, that's been branded and productized, and you don't really know what the tech behind it is. This is such a big and a groundbreaking one that we've almost interacted with the tech first rather than the integration. And we're now starting to see that change where Google is starting to pull the more complicated, if you go to that website and that startup and that little app to do that AI thing, you can connect it all together. Google's like, just type it into Google and it will do all of that for you. And I think that's potentially where some of the biggest value is going to be, is big companies that can afford the investment, that can do the guardrails, the processing, the training, take on some of the ethical responsibility for us, which again has its dangers, and almost just use what they produce as our tools without having to worry about, I need to train an AI model on this and learn about that and deploy it.
I think they even like learning how to use the tools. So forget about the tool. I mean, again, prompting is a thing. Again, a couple of years ago, they said there could be loads of people. There's been a whole new load of people who are just prompters, and I've not met a prompter yet. But again, be
we're prompting.
I suspect there are people in some big companies, but there's not suddenly this whole company's created prompters, right? And which they said was going to happen. I think prompting in itself is a really good skill. And I would say, first thing, again, go and find out how to prompt properly, because the output of the AI will be so much better if you're doing it right. So again, it's not necessarily about the technology, again, it's about how we use it as humans, right?
Yeah. If you're good at brief writing, you'll be good at prompting.
Exactly.
Not many people are good at brief writing. Working in an agency, we know that.
Don't let AI do your briefs.
Yeah.
No. subjective though, I think. So
Yeah.
the whole conversation around prompting, for example, it's the same when you have human discussions. Like if I ask you a deliberately emotive question designed to get an answer, it's no different to asking an AI the same emotive question. I think this is correct. What do you think? You've already shown your hand
Yeah.
to the tool by saying that you think this is
Mm.
correct. I think you'd get a far clearer delete as appropriate response if you were completely on the fence, gave whichever tool all of the information and say, what do you deduce from this?
Yeah.
There is a place and a time, feel free to disagree, where you can say, I think this about all of this data in front of me. What do you think? But if you are genuinely on the fence or researching or thinking about something new, and you go into this AI tool, whatever it may be, saying, I think X, you've already shown your hand and told what you're thinking. So naturally, more often than not, the tool will try and support your way of thinking as opposed to saying, no, that's incorrect. So there's a place for prompting, but it's very subjective.
Yeah, and I suppose to that though, you can use it quite cleverly to get it to argue the other side. So you can say, I'm thinking that this is a good way to go. Could you give me all the reasons you think it's a bad way to go? Like argue with me on this. And I was listening to a podcast and they said, next time you need to go into an argument or a discussion, go and do it with an AI first of all, put your points forward and get it to tell you the other side, because it's almost like helping you prepare. So, but if you're going in naively, not realizing you've kind of set it up and you've biased it to go, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's
Years ago, I used to
interesting.
say to teams that I used to lead before AI was a thing, I used to say, and I probably still stand by it now, never open Google Analytics unless you know what you're going in to find. Because before you know it, you're like 17 pages deep and you're looking at all the people who've logged onto your website from a mobile in Maidstone on a random Tuesday 10 years ago. Well, not 10 years ago anymore, but 10 months ago. And then you've just completely lost what you were doing, and there's an hour or 2 hours of your time gone, and you're no closer to the answer. So unless you have a clear thought of where you want to be, don't just begin by blindly looking
And
for
that's
stuff.
still related to the tools, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
The tools coming out every day. There's probably been one made in the time you've been doing this discussion.
It's gone out of business.
But it's you need to start with the problem, not the tool. You need to understand what it is that you're trying to fix and build out a kind of matrix or a plan around that. What you're trying to fix, what's the cost implication, what teams you need to get involved in, and then you can do some of the research. But then you've already narrowed down the kind of the area. You can kind of look at objectively at what are the right tools.
So let's have a look. We've got Brooke from Hornby Hobbies. Hi, Brooke. So Brooke's put, there's been some backlash to the use of AI in bigger companies like Duolingo and Audible. How do you predict that customers will respond to AI media content once it becomes more mainstream? And this was maybe for Lottie, maybe Azim jump in as well.
So one of the points that was made earlier about it being useful to the individuals. I think with things like Audible, I'm a big Audible listener myself. I'm a big fan. And I think it's really interesting when you listen to a story sometimes, or if you listen to anything like a podcast, whatever, and actually the person reading it just doesn't resonate with you as a person. I find their tone difficult to listen to, the pace is too slow, whatever it might be. So you think on that basis, there are definite instances where, that just doesn't work. So the fact that's not really a surprise then from using AI as an alternative where that would be an issue. But again, it's about understanding why they're doing that. If it's a cost saving exercise, fine. I think the fact if it's a methodology to allow more publications to become available in an auditory way, that's a purpose that makes sense. And I think in that instance, personally, I'll be like, okay, well, I understand why AI may have been used because that publisher or that writer hasn't been able to create otherwise. Therefore, I wouldn't be able to listen to it if they hadn't done that. Therefore, okay, I get that. If it's a case of we're just going to do it because it's cheaper or another reason that doesn't make sense as a user, then yeah, there will be backlash because it's actually I don't want to hear AI. I want to hear a person read that. I don't understand why you haven't gone down that route. I can assume it's because you want to save money to line your own pocket. Therefore, it becomes a negative connotation on that. And I think that's where you're going to get that friction, because it doesn't make the benefit isn't there for the end user. And again, that's the whole issue. Whenever you're using AI, it has to benefit the person at the end of the journey or the end of the end user. If it doesn't benefit them, it doesn't make their life better, they're not getting the value from it, it's just being had by the other side, then that's never going to work with an individual as a human.
Same for Duolingo. I think the timing of them announcing that they were slashing a lot of staff and then the introduction of lots of AI checkers and whatnot wasn't really helpful. So I think the strategy director in me says that they have some sort of strategy in play, which will pay off eventually, whenever that will be. But I feel like a lot of their activity has been very reactive rather than proactive. The backlash that they received to lots of paying customers saying, I'm trying to learn X language. You've just slashed a lot of humans and replaced them with AI. It hasn't really gone down well. The fact that they went and killed Duo, the bird, didn't sit well with a lot of people. And I just think in general, there was something I saw yesterday. I can't remember. It was Lad Bible. There's this new technology that Google have released out in the UK where you can create AI video content. So they did it. So they typically, Lad Bible, go out on the street and interview people. And what they did was they interviewed mythical people like Medusa, and it made it look like she was just walking on the street with sunglasses on, saying, "Oh, what's the number one thing people don't like about you?" And then she said something like, "Oh, they never look at me eye to eye when they're talking," which is just like it's a nice comedy thing to have, but something that we said at the very beginning, consumers will tell if it's not real, which is fine and it has a place. But if the optics of it look like you're just doing it to save money, or it's just not ideal. There's a whole other conversation we could have for another few hours, really, where I think it was Levi's, where they got a huge backlash because they decided to use AI models as opposed to real people. And these were people of color, these were women, these were marginalized communities. So naturally, they all stood up and said, there are literally millions of human people waiting for a chance, but you've just used AI
Yeah.
and not given anybody a chance. All you've done is just furthered that divide between certain communities, which has only helped yourself and not anybody else. So there's a lot of risk for very little reward, I would say.
Yeah. And it's hard, isn't it? Because I think we're going to need more and more of those things that go well and don't go well to happen to start to create better boundaries. Because I think probably some people sit there. There was probably a boardroom table one day where they went, "This is a great idea. People love it." And actually, I mean, I can't quite imagine that, because you would say, well, no, it should be human bodies. We should be showing what real people look like, etc. But there was a reason it made sense. But you then find out it doesn't in the real world.
It's so interesting when you think about that, the whole transition around, like, from a fashion perspective, moving towards like real bodies rather than being kind of, you know, thin people of a certain height and all this sort of thing. You know, that it feels like it's kind of like gone backward. It's like, well, we've made all that progress to a point where actually we have real people being represented, and now all of a sudden you're taking that away and then you're putting it back. It's like, when did, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Whether it's, hopefully it's just kind of like a trial and error, and the error has been realised, and therefore it's not going to continue. It's a shame that it had to go through that error in the first place, because arguably we should have, we as in a collective human race should have known that. However, in the absence of that, it just is really odd that we're having all those learnings up until that point about what people want, and then just completely ignored that and gone down a different route.
Yeah, no, it really is. I'm intrigued to see what else we're going to see happen, because there's going to be some more real disastrous failures, but also some incredible stuff where you go, wow. Like, I think I shared a post on LinkedIn a couple of months ago of some of the ways that you can use it to bring history alive. So using these tools so that you could actually go and talk to people from different ages and whatnot. Actually, for young people at school, like young children, learning about history, where at the moment they watch textbook, read a textbook and talk about it, to be able to watch a video and see King Henry VIII and kind of put some personality behind him for their kind of imagination and bringing it to life, it's or to help fuel their imagination, could be really good.
Could also use it as a synthetic user. You'd speak to him with the ape, tell him, ask.
Why did you have so many? No, interesting. I love it. So let's have a look. We are still on AI. Honestly, it's all AI. Jordan from Huntington's Disease Association. Hi, Jordan. Thank you for your question. We found that some funders are using AI search to discover charities that they wish to fund. Do you have any advice for improving our ask engine optimization? And that is, let's start with Matt, but maybe Azim, you might have some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing that I would say, and I'm sure there's going to be another question about it, is don't get too scared too quickly on that topic. There's lots of, obviously, the sort of investment and hype around AI search is going to change everything, and we need to be investing in it now, and it's going to take over and replace Google. We're still seeing Google at 90% of search traffic. So I don't think it's the kind of thing where everyone needs to drop sticks and move away from SEO and into AEO or GEO or whatever the acronym ends up being. There are things that you can do though that I think is sort of the hedging your bets strategic way of approaching traditional SEO that will still have benefits for GEO, for example. So one of those is looking at just, are you actually setting up your website in a way that is effective? Have you got schema? Are you using headings correctly? Do you follow Google's existing guidelines on what search should be and what the quality of content should be? If you're not doing that, you're sort of missing the foundation to be able to do the more advanced GEO work that maybe you might want to do, or maybe investors might be wanting you to do. What I would also look at is how that spreads on the entire web rather than just your website, because while Google is looking at your domain and indexing that, what ChatGPT is doing or Gemini is doing is looking at your brand as an entity beyond just what you're telling it. It's what everyone else is saying about your brand as well. So social listening is going to be key. You need to look at review sites, something that is trusted around what people's experiences are with your brand, like Trustpilot or Reddit. Those are going to be really key. If you've got really negative mentions and people who aren't having their problems answered and a low trust score, all of those signals are probably going to overwhelm anything that you're trying to put in on your, as we've pointed out, probably quite biased website. So you need to look at that more wide sort of brand presence at a semantic level, which is what the AI is doing. I think Reddit is definitely a key one. We've seen that Google is partnering with Reddit for their data, or that sort of first person experience with a product or a service. And they're rocketing up the rankings in terms of just organic search anyway. So we know that they like that kind of content. If you're not looking at that and you're not aware what people are saying about your brand, definitely start looking.
It's like we're back at the early days of Google though, isn't it? Because these new tools that are out there, or even Google advancing its way that it's using AI in search, we don't really know where it's going to go or what they're going to start to. I mean, for me, the hope would be that it is still going to be looking for that authentic human content and really trying to provide the best answers, and that we won't go back to some of the kind of really easy black hat techniques that you had back in the day. Like, I don't think any of these tools will get fooled by that kind of thing. So it's like actually sticking to what we know of putting good content out there and understanding. But I suppose for small businesses, and we'll have a variety of large and small on here today, for them to suddenly start, okay, now I need a Reddit strategy and I need to make sure I'm doing this here and that there. And it's going to be tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of stuff that you can read about. If you put an llms.txt file on your website, it will all go crazy. It's the classic sort of early black hat stuff of, if you do this thing that way on that website, it will amazingly magically solve it.
There's never a magic button, is there?
Yeah, the
No.
server log evidence seems to suggest llms.txt is just read as a text file and going, oh, that's weird. There's no.
So you just look silly.
Yeah, so be wary of anyone who's trying to suck you up into this is a specific strategic way of definitely exactly how it works. Because A, it probably isn't how it works, and B, in 2 months' time, that might have changed because we're such sort of early adopters of these technologies.
Anything that says that I've got this weird trick,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's probably
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you and rub your tummy and push this button 3 times, you'll be everywhere.
The only thing I'd very quickly add to what Matt said is now is a great time for digital PR, because exactly with everything that you said about brand, one of the things that puts people off is, oh, with digital PRs, I'm not quite sure this, that, and the other. And I put something on my LinkedIn the other week. We've said that a lot, haven't we? I've shared this on LinkedIn. By the way, it's a great opportunity to follow us as all on LinkedIn. But with the way Google's going now, I think, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience, which will probably mirror everybody's, is if you're brand new into the market for something, you'll type in best X. What used to happen was you'd get a list of pages where it would be review sites or top 10 this or best, I don't know, best treadmill for 2025. What happens is the user journey is so fractured and frustrated that people will turn to LLMs and say, I want to find the best treadmill for under £1,000. Do not show me any review sites and show me something that is this, this, and this. Immediately, by saying, do not show me any review sites, you've discounted all of those anyway. Then you'll get a much more clearer picture. And before you know it, you're off the search engine, navigating through LLMs, which is why, back to my original point, digital PR is going to be absolutely huge. Get your brand mentioned. People here Reddit, which is correct. And then the black hat people amongst us are like, right, we need to flood Reddit with a sea of positivity,
You
which will,
ditch it.
yeah, which will only work temporarily. But I would say invest that time, effort, and money into your wider marketing strategy. Get digital PR involved. A lot of businesses are put off because brand isn't sexy half of the time, and it doesn't give you that
Can't
immediate,
measure.
yeah, it doesn't give you that immediate ROI. And if I was being completely binary about it, I think there'll be one side of the fence where people have invested in this early and they've seen very, very positive results in AI overviews and whatever's to come next. And then there'll be the people who are left behind saying, right, we need to catch up. How are we going to get back all this lost traffic to AI overviews, to everything
Yeah.
else? So
It's going to be like the Wild West out there a little bit, isn't it, of knowing what to do. Right, I'm gonna group a couple of questions. So this is Aaron from sparbreaks.com and Elliot from Amtivo. Hi, hope you are all well. We've got two questions here, so they're quite similar. So we've got Aaron's was how much is the growth of AI impacting SEO volumes? Where do we expect this to trend? But then moving into Elliot's question was, how do you think Google's expansion of AI overviews and the introduction of AI mode will impact user behavior? So a bit more on the trend point. And he's just expanded with these. Is it still relevant to focus primarily on keywords, or should the priority shift towards structured data in a way that clearly communicates to Google that your content directly matches what users are searching for? So overall kind of AI volumes and where we expect it to trend, and then diving into AI overviews and AI mode. Matt, it feels like
that feels like a one.
That was complex enough.
Yeah, I'm confused at it.
At the top level, that sort of first part of the question, as I said earlier, it's not having as big an impact as people feel like it is. Was sort of between 2 and 10% are the best estimates at the moment of search that's going through there. But it's a question of classification. So we saw this with AI overviews, with featured snippets, with weather widgets, Google Flights. People quite often will search things that are utterly banal, have no commercial intent, and will never bring you any value. So they're not really the kind of thing that we need to be worrying about as businesses. Like, when did England win the World Cup? Unless you're trying to sell England World Cup merch from that year, probably not relevant. So the quality of those searches is just as important as the quantity. And I'm sure you have this with click-through rate for paid. If you're optimizing for click-through rate, you're paying for all of those clicks and not actually getting quality traffic through. We need to be looking at what does that traffic do when it gets to your website from these different sources. And what we've seen is that LLM traffic tends to be much less engaged with your website, much less likely to convert, because it is not like a direct search for your brand. It hasn't got all of the indexing and the ranking system that Google has built. It's essentially random, sort of probabilistic norms that this might match what you're looking for. So yeah, the impact definitely isn't there yet. In terms of what we can do as brands to sort of preempt what that trend is going to be, it will increase. AI mode is definitely going to change user behavior. It will be, I think, probably less about your platform and more about your brand. But we need to be demonstrating that we are experts, that we are authoritative, that we are trustworthy, all of the things that we were traditionally doing in SEO anyway. You need to keep doing those things.
Yeah.
And so just to add, so I think what's interesting, slightly different tangent, but with the issue around zero clicks, I think what's really interesting has been like the last, or this year really, it's been a kind of big revise over the proportion of zero clicks which is zero click being a search that then results either in no onward search or kind of a research within there rather than going through to a site. But actually the number of zero clicks has not changed appreciably in the last 5 or 6 years. So it's kind of semi-plateaued. So it'd be interesting to see whether actually now we do see any substantial increase in the volume of people who aren't then going through to a site, or whether that continues on that vein. But I think that's quite interesting, because again, it's that big like, oh, zero clicks is a big issue. It's like, it's not really changed. And obviously AI, we've been talking about it for the last however many 2 years, whatever. It's not really had a material impact on that particular metric if you look at it from that perspective. But yeah, I think AI mode will be an interesting one. I'd seen some articles of people saying, from a paid perspective, it's going to have an impact. And like the cynic in me says, Google is not going to be cutting its money off anytime soon. So we'll see how that actually pans out. But I think, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves, how Google starts to bring in kind of the links through to sites when you use AI mode at the moment. There's limited access then through to click through to sites. So going to be interesting how they evolve that, but realistically, like, they're going to have to consider both sides of like the customer's experience, which obviously is their priority. And And then actually, you know, from a commercial perspective as well, like what's going on. So I think
Yeah.
that is going to be interesting, like how that adapts. At the moment, obviously it is quite limited. Yeah, but it'd be yeah.
I think that commercial point is key for the providers as well.
Yeah.
So Google isn't going to not put ads in everything it can possibly
Yeah.
find to put ads in. That's what Google does and how it makes its money.
Yeah.
I think a lot of AI tools, AI platforms, providers, trainers are all running on this model of offer it cheap, get people using it, build up that sort of awareness and market share, and then figure out how to monetize it later. We will see that monetization start to creep in as these platforms understand, okay, this is where we are, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah, makes sense. And we are doing our Search Pulse quarterly report, which actually, interestingly, so as a bit of a spoiler alert, the second version of our Search Pulse report is about to come out. The data is not very different from Q1, but that's interesting in itself to know that it isn't, because again, we over-index on these things, don't we? Because we are in an industry where AI is everywhere, and you can't join a webinar or a live stream without hearing AI. Sorry, it's everywhere. We're talking about it, but actually, for most people that aren't in this sector, it's not as much everywhere, and they're not thinking about it as much as we are. So therefore, it isn't changing as rapidly, but having that finger on the pulse, and that's why we started Search Pulse as a quarterly report, to be able to see as it's changing, when do you need to know more? So that does remind me, and actually maybe now's a good time, Erin will pop in the chat, we've got a Search Pulse Brunch and Learn coming up 31st of July, I believe. So if you want to come to that and learn a bit more about what we're doing and the data that we're collecting, then we'd love to see you there.
That's a good point though. I think timing is everything with all these new technologies. You know, you have to have an awareness of what's going on, but be cautious to go too soon on things. You know, you can spend a lot of time on innovation or with technology, and you know, yes, you need to dip your toe in the water, but yeah, again, there's so much going on. You need to be really critical when you're thinking around what to pick, what horses to back, and just keep an eye on things. Don't always rush in.
And that's a nice little segue for one little question that I was going to come to Mike on, just around platform choice from a tech perspective. If people are thinking about websites, what should they, because there's so much out there. There's things like Webflow that people are talking about lots at the moment. There's your headless CMSs, you've got custom builds, but then people are going, oh, that AI can just build it, can't it? No, not quite. What should people be thinking about? And I'm looking for like a 2-minute answer here, just watching the clock.
Right, let me set my timer.
Max 2 minutes.
I mean, ultimately, it really depends on what your use case is. Like there's always been a plethora of different CMS options around there. It's probably got bigger now with the advent of kind of headless and composable architecture. You've still got some of the monolithic platforms like WordPress and Drupal and Sitecore around. But it really comes down to what your requirements are. If you've got a fairly small brochureware website that doesn't have many integrations and you're a small team managing it internally, you don't have too many issues to want to expand it in the future, then something like Webflow might be the right option. If you've got something that's omni-channel, is running on different areas, you've got, you know, maybe it's an e-commerce platform behind the scenes in certain other areas, you know, something like composable is going to be the right area. All of these have slightly different USPs as well. So even within headless, there's different traits that might align you. So I think really, again, almost coming back to that kind of working on a matrix for the AI tooling is understanding what you need it to do, what you want your customers to be able to do, and trying to build a framework around that. And if you don't have the technical abilities in-house to understand that, then speak to someone who knows those platforms and is able to understand what your requirements are and match them. Because there's you could waste a lot of time and a lot of money going into the wrong platform. So it's right to make this, it's important to make the right choice.
And Lab have been doing a lot of that recently with clients, haven't they? Helping kind of be that almost writing the RFP for the client as to how do you work out what it is that you need, and doing that pre-research. So lovely. So we've got 5 minutes till we wrap up. Anyone that's joined us before knows we always do this. We are going to hand you over to our feedback form, because feedback's really important to us. It helps us shape these future sessions. So we're going to give you 2 minutes on the clock to fill in our feedback form so that you have no excuses. And then we're going to come back with our killer question, which I'm going to see who wants to answer this one. But the question is, and I'll tell you now so you know you want to stay, if 2025 has started slow, what are the most effective ways to turn performance around and future-proof results for the rest of the year? So don't miss it. Be back in 2. Couple of minutes to wrap us up. This killer question, which is, if 2025 has started slow, what are the most effective ways to turn performance around and future-proof results for the rest of the year? I am going to start with Lottie.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. So my personal opinion is that search and I can't say it. Search and social listening is something that brands aren't doing enough of. And I think particularly where things are slow or things people aren't sure, things are changing quite quickly in terms of what they're doing, then having your finger on the pulse of what's going on, listening to what they're saying on social media, looking at the trend data from a search perspective is going to give you that maybe that edge or something that you haven't thought about before that you could then utilize in your strategy.
And favorite tool for doing that?
Oh, well, I guess we can be a bit biased, but we use Meltwater. But there's like Brandwatch. There's loads of other, loads of search platforms out, search and social listening platforms out there that you can use. But definitely, I think you can try and do it manually, but it's a lot of work.
Painful.
I'd suggest looking at kind of with the different tools that are available and investing in one of those because you get such a huge amount of data out of that. It's really worth the investment.
Love it. Azim.
I would say if 2025 has started off poorly, look at the beginning of 2024, go into your multi-channel funnels and look at your customer journey path, but not from the top down, from the bottom up. So look at the longest path that your customer has taken to find and convert with you and do exactly the same for 2025. Compare the two side by side. See which channels have grown massively. The ones that have grown massively, invest more. If you're not doing that already, invest more into those channels because that's where your customers are.
Nice.
And inversely, if you're thinking about cutting away from a channel or divesting from one particular channel, use that data to guide you. There's no better data than your own. So forget industry benchmarks, go with that.
Yeah.
Ensure whatever's working for you this year that didn't work last year, spend more time and money there. And always consider every single channel together because the amount of people that are probably watching this with the phone in their hand or, with another screen somewhere else, we live in a multi-screen world. So consider that the whole time.
I feel like we could do a whole session on that. And if anyone wants to pick Azim's brains on that, book a follow-up with him. Right, we are at time. Like 10-word answers. Dean.
Sense check your strategy. Are you solving your biggest challenges still as things changed? If not, if they have, go and solve that different problem.
Nice. Matt?
Look at what's worked, do more of that. Look at what hasn't worked, stop doing it.
He's a smart man.
If it's all not working, fail fast and try loads and loads of different things quickly.
Definitely. And Mike?
In the words of AI, if you're holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail. AI is going to fix everything. It's not a silver bullet. Put your audience front and center and work backwards from there.
What a beautiful way to end it as the Human First Collective. Thank you so much. Guys, you've all been amazing. We are going to get follow-ups out to you. We will get this recording out to you. You'll be welcome to share that with anyone that you want to. You can watch it back, see all the great bits. All of these people are available if you want to have follow-ups, want to ask them more questions. And as I say, there were lots of questions we didn't get to, so we will try and get answers to you in the next week or so. Thank you so much. Hope to see you on the 31st of July for our Search Pulse. Also, we're going to be at MadFest. So if you're at MadFest, come see us then. And if you didn't finish your feedback form, please do it. We really, really, really appreciate it. Have a good day and thank you so much.